Between about 1450 and 1750, the world went through a series of, well, cultural earthquakes. For centuries, the big questions, about God, the universe, our place in it, they seemed pretty much set in stone. But in this period, those certainties weren't just challenged, they were absolutely shattered. This is the story of how new faiths, radical new ideas, and completely new ways of thinking collided to basically forge the world that you and I live in today.
So why are we starting with a quote from 2006? Well, this comes from a Nigerian church leader who was talking about re-Christianizing Europe. Now, just 400 years ago, that idea would have been unthinkable. It just perfectly captures this dramatic reversal of power that started in the era we're about to explore, a time when Europe was exporting its faith with total, unwavering confidence.
All right, so our first collision happens right in the heart of Europe. For 1,000 years, Western Christendom had been this unified, monolithic power. But in the early 16th century, that whole foundation started to crack.
And it all kicks off with this moment right here. In 1517, a German priest, Martin Luther, nails his 95 Theses to a church door. He wasn't actually trying to start a revolution. He just wanted to start a debate about some of the corruption he saw in the Catholic Church. But what he ended up doing was shattering the Christian world completely.
See, this wasn't just about money or corruption. It was a huge theological challenge. Luther argued that salvation comes from your faith alone, not from doing good works or, paying the church. He said the only real authority was the Bible itself, which anyone could read, not the Pope. And that directly threatened the entire power structure of the Catholic Church.
So let's break down the fundamental split here. For Catholics, authority flows from the top down, from the Pope. For Protestants, no, it comes directly from the Bible. Catholics believed salvation required both faith and good works. Protestants said, nope, it's faith alone. And this idea of a priesthood of all believers meant that you, as an individual, could have a direct line to God. You didn't need a priest in the middle. That was a game changer.
And the result? Absolute chaos. This map shows you a continent literally fractured by faith. What came next was more than a century of brutal religious warfare, all leading up to the 30 Years' War, a conflict that just devastated Central Europe and redrew the political map forever. The religious unity of the West was gone, shattered.
Okay, so at the very same time Europe is fracturing from the inside, it's also expanding on the outside thanks to new maritime technologies. This sets the stage for our second major collision, the encounter between European Christianity and the cultures of the Americas and Asia. And as we're going to see, this was not a one-way street.
You've got two totally different game plans here, and it reveals a lot. In the Americas, where European empires had overwhelming military power, Christianity was often spread by force. But in China, which was this powerful, unified empire, missionaries had zero military advantage. So they had to take a completely different approach, one based on respect, on intellectual exchange, just to even get in the door.
To get a sense of the scale of this cultural destruction in the Americas, just think about this number. By 1535, a single bishop in Mexico claimed to have personally destroyed 20,000 indigenous idols. This wasn't about persuasion, it was a systematic campaign to just erase what was there before.
But here's the thing. Local cultures didn't just disappear. They fought back, they resisted, they adapted. You had movements like the Taqui Oncoy in Peru, which called for a total rejection of Christianity, even predicting their old gods would come back and defeat the Christian God. But more often than not, local beliefs started to blend with the new faith, creating these really unique, hybrid forms of Christianity that you can still see today.
And these two images, they sum it up perfectly. On the left, you've got a modern festival in Peru, and you can see Incan traditions just woven right into Catholic practice. That blending is called syncretism. Then on the right, you see Jesuit missionaries in China, and they're using their scientific knowledge, things like map making, to earn the respect of the educated elite class. Two continents, two vastly different stories.
Now, it's really easy to frame this whole era as just being about Europe's impact on the world, but that is not the whole story. At the exact same time, major religious shakeups were happening from within other cultures, and they had nothing to do with European influence.
Take the Islamic world, for instance. A scholar named Al-Wahhab launched this really powerful reform movement in 18th century Arabia. He basically argued that certain practices, like worshiping saints, were corruptions of the true faith, and were a reason for the Ottoman Empire's weakness. This was a call for internal purification, a return to the fundamentals.
It was not a reaction to the West. And at the same time in India, something entirely new was popping up. Sikhism, founded by Guru Nanak, actually tried to bridge the gap between Hinduism and Islam. Its core message, there is no Hindu, there is no Muslim, rejected caste distinctions and preached that all people were equal. It was this unique faith born from the incredible cultural mix of that region.
And when you put these events on a timeline, it just clicks. The Protestant Reformation in Europe, the birth of Sikhism in India, the rise of Wahhabism in Arabia, they were all happening at roughly the same time. This was a period of global religious upheaval, not just a European story.
And that brings us to our final and maybe the most profound collision of all, the birth of modern science. And look, this wasn't just another set of beliefs. This was a fundamentally new way of understanding the world, one based not on faith or ancient texts, but on observation, evidence, and good old human reason.
This was the central revolutionary question. I mean, for thousands of years, the universe was seen as this divine creation, guided by supernatural forces. The scientific revolution proposed something totally radical. What if the universe isn't some divine being, but it's a machine, a giant clockwork mechanism that operates according to predictable mathematical laws that we could actually figure out?
The first big blow to that old worldview came from Copernicus. By suggesting that the sun, not the earth, was the center of our system, he basically demoted humanity from the center of cosmic attention. It was such a simple shift, but it had staggering theological and philosophical implications.
Of course, this new science was bound to clash with established religious authority. The most famous example, of course, is Galileo. He was put on trial by the Inquisition for defending Copernicus's sun-centered model. And yeah, they forced him to publicly recant, but you can't put an idea like that back in the box. It was out.
This quote from Johannes Kepler just perfectly captures the new way of thinking. The work of scientists like him and later Isaac Newton, with his universal laws of gravitation, painted a picture of a self-regulating universe, one that didn't necessarily need a divine hand constantly guiding it along.
So in the 18th century, people started applying this scientific thinking to society itself. In these intellectual gatherings called salons, thinkers of the Enlightenment asked a new question. If reason can uncover the laws of the universe, can it also uncover the natural laws of government, economics, and human rights?
And this was their basic method. Step 1. Start with your own reason, not with what you've been told. 2. Be skeptical of authority. 3. Figure out the universal laws that govern human life. And 4. Use that knowledge to build a better, more rational society. This whole approach grew directly out of the scientific revolution.
Which leaves us with one last question to chew on. The clash between faith and reason, the blending of global cultures, the constant questioning of authority, all these forces that were unleashed centuries ago, they still shape our most heated debates today, don't they? So are we still living in the world that these collisions created? Are we still just navigating the aftershocks?